Um, Hello again, everyone. My name is Jamey Stevenson. I'm a game designer, educator, and nonprofit organizer. Also the director of Tech Valley Game Space, a community of local game makers, and a member of the Social Justice Artists Collective. Tonight, I want to talk to you about protest games. I create free browser games inspired by a wide variety of topics, ranging from the personal to the political. I've made games about gentrification, the glass ceiling, managing anxiety, the challenges of building resilient communities, and participating in awful political debates that can only be won by shouting the loudest. I've also created a number of games inspired by the history and culture of the capital region. These range from a series of interconnected web poems to a goofy game about obeying Uncle Sam, to a game where players clean out the apartments of evicted tenants in a retro-futuristic version of Troy. This string of local history games began life in 2015 with an event the Tech Valley Game Space organized called the Local History Game Jam. The event brought game makers together over a weekend to create projects inspired by local history, culminating in a showcase where the games were projected onto the outside of the Arts Center downtown Troy. Going back in time from the local history protests in 2015 to 2008, I was living in Troy, and some of you may remember this event where the city of Troy actually shut down an art exhibition at the Sanctuary for Independent Media, which was artist Wafa Bilal showcasing a modded version of Shooter, which he had just done a swap of. So instead of killing the usual types of folks who you were killing in these games at the time, instead you were fighting George W. Bush. And City of Troy and Robert Murch in particular shut down the Sanctuary for Independent Media on kind of trumped up reasons of supposedly it not being up to code and not being safe to have people in there. And Robert Murch was pretty notorious for doing this in the city at the time, sort of selective enforcement of building codes for political purposes against his political opponents and just people he didn't like. So there was a big protest outside of City Hall in Troy, including lots of local game developers and others, in support of games as protected free speech and games as art. So it was when I was thinking about protest games, it's a moment that I often go back to. And it was particularly ironic because we were protesting in front of Troy City Hall after this exhibition had been shut down, supposedly because the Sanctuary for Independent Media was an unsafe building. Meanwhile, Troy City Hall, folks may know, is now demolished. Since then, it's been completely torn down because even at the time, it was a very unsafe building that was crumbling. So anyway, I don't think you can craft better sort of political metaphors sometimes than reality gives you. So that was some of my own background with games and political games, protest games. But it's not the only type of thing that I do, and obviously it's been a long time since 2008 or 2015. But my thoughts turned to this topic again a while back during some recent interactions with Ben Chang. Many of you know the director of RPI's Game Simulation Arts and Sciences degree program. He had shared a link to this New York Times article about the most influential works of American protest art since World War II. And along with the article, Ben also posed a question. What would be the nearest equivalent to these works in the medium of video games? So I racked my brain. I tried to think of some examples beyond the one that I'd previously shared. And some things came to mind. So one example is the story many of you, I'm sure, know about Warren Robinett working for Atari at the time when they had a ban on creators having any credits in the games they worked on because they were worried other companies would, try to recruit their employees. So they said, no, you can't have any credit on your work. And Warren Robinett famously created this secret room within Adventure with a very flashy credit sequence. So that is certainly an act of protest that, I think an early example of some like labor-related protest from a game programmer that was interesting. Maybe that's one example. Here's another one of my favorites. If any of you have ever heard of the activist group, the Yes Men, or Jacques Servine, Jacques was a programmer on SimCopter for Maxis, and um, they had included these sort of bikini-clad women in the game, and as a subversive act, Jacques, built these bikini men, right? Why not have some more kind of parody there? And he had programmed them to appear only on certain dates. So he programmed them to appear on his birthday and I think Friday the 13th as well. But due to a bug, they ended up appearing much more frequently. And this is pretty much the most well-known and well-remembered feature of this game to this day. And after the fact, so Maxis ended up firing Jacques over this inclusion. This was put in, without anybody else's knowledge. And Jacques has given various explanations afterwards for the reasoning for doing this. So he had described one other employee as quote unquote aggressively heterosexual on the team. And so that person was responsible for these sort of bikini-clad women, so he wanted to counteract that. But he also has said that honestly, the working conditions on the project were horrendous, and there was lots of unpaid overtime and crunch. And he didn't necessarily say that that was his reason for doing this, but he did say if he felt happier in the job and it felt like, he and his fellow employees were treated better, then he would have been less inclined to risk it, right? So anyway, last thing that I want to share about SimCopter, and it's a great info about this that you can look up. I recommend it. It's a great story. This is just a quote from, this may or may not be accurate. This comes from the Wikipedia page, but it was too good a quote not to share. This is describing the bikini men. And the claim is, quote, their fluorescent nipples were drawn with a special rendering mode, usually reserved for fog-piercing runway landing lights. So, fun fact for you there. So those were a couple examples that came to mind, but they're examples of sort of subversive acts, I would say, acts of protest by creators of commercial games, where they kind of snuck these things into the games they were working on. But what about games that actually protest, wider issues as well, kind of more outward-facing? Not that the previous examples didn't, but so one example that immediately springs to mind there is the work of Molly Industria, a developer whose games attempt to reappropriate the medium and use it to address deeper topics. Their work even includes games that are made to be played at a protest. So there you go, right? Case closed, protest games. But what about some less obvious examples? I love this definition of play provided by Salin and Zimmerman in their book Rules of Play. I think you could replace the word play with the word protest, and the quote would still ring true. I believe that rebellion is the essence of play, and this makes video games a promising medium for protest art. Salin and Zimmerman also go on to describe a particular type of play, which they describe as transformative play, where the free movement of play alters the structure within which it takes place, which has a lot in common with the goals of protest. But how can we foster this type of play? And what do games do well? Well, I think a lot of us know as game creators, right? Games are interactive systems, and they allow us to explore systemic issues through play. A great example of this can be seen in Parable of the Polygons, an essay about building diverse communities that mixes text explanations with interactive simulations. This combo allows readers to better comprehend the factors that can lead to undesirable outcomes. Games can be fun, and fun can be a powerful rhetorical tool. Thoughts and Prayers is a free browser game that can be completed in just a few minutes and allows players to see the impact that their thoughts and prayers have on the ongoing epidemic of gun violence and mass shootings. Spoiler alert, not a whole lot. Games let us inhabit characters and walk in their shoes. In the case of A Woman Goes to a Private Games Industry Party, designer Rosa Carbo Mascarell invites players to take a walk in her own shoes and experience the various forms of harassment that she regularly encounters at such events. Games let us try out new roles and experience new challenges. In Papers, Please, players take on the role of a border checkpoint agent who must balance the needs of their own family with the challenges of enforcing xenophobic immigration policies and navigating an increasingly Byzantine set of rules. Games can help us to process our own feelings and share them with others. In Dysphoria, Anthropy presents a series of short autobiographical vignettes that allow players to better understand some of the struggles associated with Anna's experiences with gender dysphoria and hormone replacement therapy. Games can tackle serious topics and themes. The accessibility of authoring tools like Twine and Bitsy has empowered a diverse range of creators to enter the landscape of games and interactive fiction. Porpentine's Howling Dogs is one of many examples demonstrating how this new wave of creators is using interactive media to address heavy topics. Games can be abstract and metaphorical. They can utilize a wide variety of multimedia forms to craft interactive metaphors. In To My Firstborn Son, Stephen Lavelle creates an expressionistic landscape that expertly combines written text and 3D environments to communicate a powerful message about generational misogyny. Games let us enact and practice cultural values and ideas. During the New Games movement of the 70s and 80s, designers intentionally created games that incorporated countercultural values like cooperation and mutual aid. By playing these new games, participants could discover different ways of interacting with one another. Games can provide community for isolated people. Kind Words is a game that encourages players to open up about difficult feelings and experiences, and provides an interface for other players to respond with support, sympathy, advice, or even just acknowledgement. The game helped many people to feel less alone during the pandemic and since, and it continues to do so today. Games can facilitate positive social interactions. Where Should We Begin by Esther Peel demonstrates how games can go beyond simple icebreakers and foster deeper, more meaningful connections between players. Through such interactions, we can strengthen our relationships with others and grow our protest movements 2 people at a time. And I had mentioned the local history game jam, but I just wanted to mention one other event that Tech Valley Game Space organized last year called Pixels for Progress. The idea here, which came from local educator and game developer Sarah Lauser, was to create a game jam focused on bringing together artists, coders, and game makers with activists and community organizers to explore the intersection of games, art, social justice, and political activism. And our first and to date only Pixels for Progress Jam was a lot of fun. We want to thank everybody who participated and created games. And I'm really passionate about trying to continue this effort to see if we can organize more of these events to bring folks in our world of game development together with the broader community to collaborate, particularly with activists. So if that's something that you're also interested and passionate about, I would love to speak with you about it. Last thing I wanted to say, since protest is all about taking action, I wanted to conclude with a little call to action. So this was something that we asked people to fill out at the Protest Games workshop and in some events leading up to it, where we wanted to encourage everyone to consider how you can use games to support a cause or organization that you care about. So I would love to hear your thoughts if you end up doing that. And I want to thank you, and I want to thank everyone at the IGDA Albany chapter for having me. Thanks.
Hey, thank you. Um, I was leaving. I did leave some time if people want to do like a quick Q&A, but if no one has any questions,
Yeah, happy
I
to
guess
take
I just have a thought. Um, I think outside of just the actual games themselves, you know, another form of protest through games is just the types of games that people choose to play
Mhm.
can almost be their own form of protest against
Yes.
cultural ideas or just mm, yeah,
Yeah.
things can get political with just the games people choose to play in general.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm curious, Ethan, did you have any examples that spring to mind for you?
um, it's hard to think of like a specific one, but there's definitely sort of this battle culture war between um I guess more woke uh games and more I guess conservative I could say. Games that are more traditional in their representations.
Mhm.
I think people can get up in arms about that and I think that affects how people view the games and what they choose to play is this larger culture war that's formed and it's a form of protest.
Yeah, well, I certainly um, know that a lot of us have lived through many years of those culture wars from all sides, and certainly from the game developer side, particularly marginalized creators, right? Been harassed in targeted campaigns and all kinds of other things beyond just
Yeah.
people uh, not supporting their work in other ways. But yeah, I think there's lots of examples of people sort of voting with their wallet, to use a cheesy term, very
Yeah.
cheesy. But yeah, yeah, sure. I just shared, since somebody was asking, thanks, Ethan. I shared a link to the slides, and I think I just set them so anyone can view them. But let me know if you have any trouble.
awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Um, Ethan, would you be ready to do your talk?
Yeah, I can go.